Students often get so caught up with the shape of the eye that they forget the form of the eye, which is why we're looking at the form of a sphere, because that's essentially what an eyeball is. When drawing an eye, one of the most important things is to think of it as a three-dimensional object, which is why I've wrapped that ball with Play-Doh to replicate the top lid, the bottom lid, and that caruncle, that little pink thing in the corner. So I'm doing that so you can see that the top lid projects out a little bit, and it creates a little bit of a cast shadow on what is essentially the white of the eye. So it is really important to think in sculptural terms when you're drawing the eye, not just as shapes, not just as outlines, but actual three-dimensionality here. So to start with, we're going to make a sphere. You have a stencil at your easel, and you are going to be lightly tracing that stencil. It is best if you use a broken line. So go as light as you can and try using a broken line there. What you don't want to do is have a thick outline, because that's going to flatten your form from the get-go. Now you should already have a reference picture of a sphere on your board. If not, I have extras. So you're going to be treating this as a sphere at first, which means you have to have a form shadow, you have to have midtones, and a highlight. You do not need to put a cast shadow in, although you could. It'll just look like there's an eye sitting on a tabletop. So anyway, I'm going lighter than I think I'll need to at first, and I like to use a diagonal hatch. You're welcome to do that too, and by hatch I mean like a diagonal line with my stroke. Just like with the gradient, it's important that you have a gap in between the red to the gray. So you want to leave the gray of the paper exposed. So you want to kind of look at that reference picture of the sphere and ask yourself, okay, where are the midtones? The whites shouldn't get too close to the midtones. And if you need to lighten up, like I need to work on my transition there, because it's a form shadow, and form shadows are soft, so they softly move into the light. So I needed to take my eraser there and stamp it down. Now you do have a kneaded eraser. That's what we're using, just like with the charcoal, and you want to kind of make a stamp motion to remove some of the red charcoal. So here I am darkening it a little bit more. I think it's always good to go lighter than you think you need to at first. And then I'm going to that left side of the sphere where the light is striking. And same kind of deal. I want to make sure my shading is tight, which means that there's no gaps in my shading. It looks consistent. And I'm going again at a diagonal hatch. And I want to make sure that the white dissolves into the gray of the paper, just like on my gradient. So here's what it looks like. The white and the red aren't touching. They're not even close. There's kind of a buffer of gray of the paper in between the two. Really take your time with this. I want your sphere to look like an actual ball. Okay, once you're happy with how the sphere is looking, we're going to be drawing directly on top of it. We'll be drawing an iris. So I'm lightly penciling in the shape of an iris, which is a perfect circle, and it's going dead center within my sphere. So there's the pupil that I've lightly outlined too. And again, the pupil also goes dead center of the iris. Just to remind you, the iris is the colored part of the eye. The pupil is the black dot in the center of your iris. So I start off lighter than I think I'll need to, and then I start to darken it as I progress. So that pupil should be the darkest value on this eyeball. And then I'm going to be lightly shading in the iris itself, although I'm going to try and keep in mind where I'm planning to put the highlight in. And you can do what I just did there, where you erase out where the highlight's going to go, because anywhere you plan on putting the white, you have to erase out first so that there is no red powder there first. So I'm just going in and filling in that iris. As a note, you want the iris to be about the size of a nickel. I'm going a little bit darker on the rim, but not too dark, and I don't want it to look like a harsh outline. That's why I'm making it kind of a soft line. I'm doing sort of a hatch mark with my pencil stroke, going back into the pupil and darkening that as well. So overall, you want that iris to kind of have a soft feel to it. Yes, there's an outer rim to it, but it's a soft line. And then I'm going to go into the highlight within the iris and pop that in with the white. I like to use quite a bit of pressure, and I go in kind of like a tight circle pattern when I'm popping in a highlight. So it should look like there's a sparkle within the eye. Most eyes will have a highlight unless the eye is in shadow. Next, we're going to go ahead and try putting an upper lid on the eye. So the upper lid is kind of like a curve or an arch. The overall shape of the eye should be like a football or sort of like a lemon. You want that top lid to actually go over the iris, so it's kind of overlapping the iris. On the bottom lid, you want it to almost touch or to just barely touch the bottom of the iris. So the top lid almost always covers a little bit of the iris unless the person is really scared. And again, do this lightly at first. I always darken the top lid a little bit more than the bottom. That's because on most people, their top lid is darker due to thickness of eyelashes. So eyelashes tend to be thicker on the top than on the bottom lid. And then I might go in there and adjust the white of the eye, make that look more like a real eye, so there'd be a little bit more white there to the left. And you can see that eye is looking 3D because we've done the ball first. That was such a big, important step. So every eye that we do from this point forward, I want you to think of it as a sphere. If you can do that, it will help you to get the form of the eye, not just the shape, and you'll be such a strong artist because of that.